I was actually teaching CVOICE to a group of students probably a year ago or so now. And I got into this topic, which is a class of restriction or calling restrictions, making sure that people dialing certain numbers are supposed to be dialing certain numbers. And I had a student raise their hand and ask the question. They said, well, do people still do this, really? I mean, do people still try and, like call long distance from work because they don't want to pay the bill at home? Because, I mean, welcome to the modern day. We all have cell phones, and cell phones include free long distance, and international prices have come down in a huge way. And most people don't even use the phone to call internationally. I use most people. I should say a lot of people don't even use the phone to call internationally anymore because there's absolutely free way of doing it using things like Skype or whatever instant message client you want to that supports voice over IP as well. So I answered the question. I said, well, yes, it does still happen from your users, but also there's more that you can do with class of restriction than just blocking users. That's my first topic on there. Using this concept, I mean, since we have calls in our voice over IP systems coming from all over the place, there may be times where we want to put restrictions on it based on where that caller is coming from. For example, you might want to say that, well, I only want 911 to go out this line if it's from people at the local office. I don't want a call accidentally routing in from over the WAN link coming out to this 911 carrier. No, that would be bad to have the emergency. You see what I mean? It's more than just blocking users. There's a lot you can do with it. However, keep in mind that it's still a big part of what it is restricting what people can dial. So we'll look at restricting PSTN dial peers. I love just swiping across the screen like that to support this feature. And then the big thing is understanding this complex topic known as core lists. Now this feature goes by many names, and I want to throw them all out there so you're not confused if somebody uses a different term. Class of restriction, what we're talking about here, is Cisco's way of implementing calling restrictions on their voice gateways. Now, their voice gateways could be used, for instance, for SRST, Survivable Remote Site Telephony, supporting a site's phone system if the call manager or CUCM server goes down. It could be used as a call manager express device. It could be used to support many different clients coming together. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to route calls using their voice gateways, and when you're using that, they call this feature class of restrictions, and you actually configure this thing known as core lists. It's going to be our topic that we set up in here. But this same feature in CUCM in Call Manager is known as class of control. In the old PBX days, they actually called this class of service, even using the acronym COS, which overlaps heavily with our quality of service terms because COS is actually a tag that we put on a frame at layer 2. So all of these things are referencing the same thing, which is calling privileges. So this feature does require an in-depth understanding of inbound and outbound dial peers, which is why I've placed it right at the tail end of all this dial plan and dial peer construction. It's really a feature that relies on the dial peers. It grants privileges based on what dial peer you receive as your incoming and which dial peer you go out as your outgoing. And it does require more detailed dial peers, meaning if you have just one dial peer that says 9T goes to the PSTN, it's one dial peer to rule them all, then what this feature does is grant or deny access to that dial peer. So if you wanted to maybe say, well, these people can call long distance and these people can't, or these people can call internationally and these people can't, then it doesn't work with this single dial peer. This is pretty much you can access the PSTN, which is the whole thing, or you can't. So we have to break it down, and it's best practice to break it down into more detailed ones anyway. Now, I will say, when I first got into voice over IP long ago, this was one of those things that I literally walked away from the course going, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. And the instructor used so many analogies. I felt like, that I was sitting in the room with all the students and all the other. It was one of those times where I'm looking around and I'm like, all of them, all of these people seem to know what they're doing. I don't even want to raise my hand right now because I'm so lost. I just don't get it. So I know that and I relate to it. So I want to really take my time going through this because it can be confusing. But once you get it, it's going to be like, oh, it's again, just like digit manipulation. Once you get it, you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Same concept here. Now, the first part of implementing class of restriction or coreless on a voice gateway is to break down your dialing plan, just what I was saying, into all of the individual patterns. You can't use the 9T for things. So what I've done here is broken down the PSTN dialing plan, I should add in here, in North America, because I know many of you are listening to me from all around the world, and you've got your own patterns. It's not hard to do. As long as you know how your dialing patterns work for your country, then it's not too hard to break it down into 4 or 5 basic dial pairs that cover most of the landscape. The big thing that you want to remember is that the voice gateway uses insta-match. I don't know the best way to say it. Immediate match kind of system. Meaning, as soon as it gets a match, it does not wait for more dial digits. It's going to immediately route the call. So that's a big one to remember when you're looking at, for instance, 7-digit and 10-digit dialing. In this case, I look at this and I go, okay, this isn't going to work. I would not be able to, at least with these patterns, to have an area to where I support 7 and 10-digit dialing, and I'll say with these patterns. It is possible to do 7-digit dialing and 10-digit dialing combined, but looking at this two, if you look, if somebody dials 9 and then dials 7 digits, the router does an insta match here. It's going to say, oh, I've got a match. It's not going to wait for these 3 additional digits at the end to make 10-digit dialing possible. So if I'm in an area that supports 7-digit dialing, then use that. If I'm in an area that supports 7 or 10, then I would say, why don't you just to make it easy on yourself, unless you want to put a few more patterns in, just say, hey, our organization uses 10-digit dialing, period. And then, I'll just leave it at that. There's multiple ways that you can go about it. There's ways of doing both, but that's the kind of policy that you might want to roll out there. Notice this one doesn't bother you when you have 10-digit, which is local calling, and then 11-digit, which is long distance, because this one separates itself by beginning with a 1. So this one says any digit but 1 as the first digit after the 9. This one says I'm going to only match things that have 1 as the first digit, which doesn't have an overlap anymore with this. Now, question for you. Why do I have the command prefix 1 at the end of that? What's the point of that? Think about that. Well, the reason why is because when I dial the POTS dial pair, every POTS dial pair will strip any explicitly defined digit, which is the 9 and the 1 included, and a lot of carriers require you to have that 1 on there to signify that you're dialing long distance numbers. So, and I will say, welcome to the new world. The carriers are actually getting a little lax on that. I just brought up a new PSTN connection with a telco. Actually, it was this school this Friday, and I talked to the carrier, and he goes, "Yeah, we will accept 11-digit dialing, but we've boiled it down to where you can dial anything with 10 digits anymore. You don't have to put the 1. We'll still charge you if it's long distance, but the 1 is now optional." So again, depending on your area, things may be changing. International. Again, notice same concept. I have to put the 011 in North America back on because POTS will automatically strip all of this off by default. Now, the reason I use the prefix, and on this one, I could have used the prefix, or I could use the forward, I could use this command, forward digits 11 on this to forward 11 digits and not strip the 1 off. But with this, with international, it's so broad, there's so many different dialing plans out there that I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know what the length of the dialed number is. You also notice up here at the top, I've got the 2 emergency numbers. So again, the point, you can look through those. That is a complete dialing plan for North America. The point is that we need this. It's going to take you more work, which is why I've got my studious guy with a cool laptop sitting there. It's going to take you more work to do this. However, when it's said and done, you're going to have a better looking dialing plan and one that's more flexible for restrictions. All right, so now let's get into the topic itself of class of restriction, or core lists on a router. Now, I've got to, again, remind you that I was the guy that was lost in the class when this topic was gone over. And like I said, the instructor used all kinds of analogies. He's like, okay, Jeremy, think of it this way. He's like, you've got these keys, and then you've got these locks, and the keys kind of open the locks, and you got to have this certain number of keys. And I'm just going, okay, no, I don't get it. Like, so keep on. I'm going to give you an analogy here, which really isn't an analogy at all, as it is symbolism. But if this doesn't work for you, I like when I say it, I'm going to be like, well, how could you not get this? But also realizing that I was the guy, and there was probably an instructor looking at me years ago, going, Jeremy, how do you not get this? I'm telling you, there's keys and there's locks, and you don't get it. So let me explain it. If you don't get it, keep in mind there's many other ways of explaining this. By the way, what I finally did was on the flight back from the class, I sat there online looking at the documentation, going, okay. It just took seeing enough configurations. For me, seeing the configurations is what did it for me. So, routers implement restrictions using core lists, or class of restriction lists. The way that it works is you, the callee, get your permissions from your incoming dial peer. I should underline this part. Incoming dial peer. Remember, the router always has to match an incoming dial peer, which most people don't even remember. It's just something that happens behind the scenes. Oh yeah, when I dial from a FXS port, it actually does match an incoming dial peer, which is the same dial peer as the outgoing dial peer for the FXS port, and that is going to be what assigns you your permissions, or what Cisco calls the incoming core list. So, the way that I symbolize this, again, it's not an analogy, it's more of a symbol. The way that I symbolize this is like bubbles. Right? I know, you're like, all right, you lost me already. No, this is like, you just get, when you go to McDonald's, the Playland, you go into those, well, they used to. Nowadays, you get the disease and all that. They got rid of them all. But they used to have these little ball pits where they have these plastic balls, and the kids jump into these plastic balls. So just imagine that with me. You've got all these different color plastic balls as a caller, and whatever the administrators, now this is you, whatever you assign that caller when they dial will be what color balls they have. So for example, maybe I have an FXS port here, and I have dial peer 50 pots, right? And it just says destination pattern 1111, which is this guy's phone number, and port 1/0/1. Now you might be going, well, isn't that the outgoing dial peer? Well, it is. But when this guy, if there is no outgoing call, and this guy picks up, the incoming dial peer is going to be like, oh, this is port 1/0/1. I'm going to match that. So this actually becomes the incoming dial peer. And what I can say under that dial peer, I'm not going to get into the specific syntax yet, but I can say, give that phone the blue ball, the pink ball, and the purple ball. Blue, pink, and purple. Right? So that phone, if you can imagine, has 3 playpen balls in his hand. He's holding them. And then I go to every outgoing dial peer. The outgoing dial peer will be what balls are required. What plastic balls do you have to have in your hand to get out to this dial pair? And now this is where we've got that breakdown, right? The previous slide where you broke down, here's your long distance, here's your 10-digit, here's your international, here's your emergency 911 calling. You got all these different dial pairs that connect to the PSTN, but now we can attach permissions to them. I can say, for instance, let's say for long distance, you need to have the blue and the purple ball. This is how the restrictions work. If the outgoing core, I'm going to read this and then explain it. If the outgoing core list is a subset of the incoming core list, then the call is forwarded. Okay? So, again, we look at the outgoing core list. So this guy picks up, he dials a long distance number. 1-541 111 1111. Okay, that's the number he calls. So it goes, okay, I'm matching this dial pair. It's long distance dial pair. Whoa, buddy. This requires the blue ball and the purple ball. Is that what you got? Well, based on the incoming dial pair, he's going to say, well, actually, I have blue, red and purple, and the router says, you're good. Why? Because your incoming core list is a subset. You had the blue ball and you had the purple ball. So you are allowed to make this long distance call, right? Now, I know some of you are like, okay, what's the red ball? Well, the red ball might be used for something else, like maybe to make 911 calls. Maybe you don't want a lobby phone to be able to make 911 emergency calls because you work at a school and the students, a bunch of pranksters in the past have picked up that phone and dialed 911. All the police show up. It isn't pretty. So what you do is you say, well, I want to now require people to have the red ball. That's green in my picture. The red ball in order to dial 911. So in this case, this guy picks up, he's having an emergency, he dials 911. It's going to come in and say, oh, I've got blue, red, and purple, and I just dialed 911. And it'll say, well, no worries. All that's required is a red ball to dial 911. The blue and the purple, sure, that's great. That means you must be able to dial some other stuff, but from the router's perspective, he's like, I don't care. You've got red, and that's a subset of my outgoing dial. Is this making sense? Are you following me here, right? So, again, if the outgoing core list is a subset of the incoming core, so if you at least have, here's another way of saying it, if you at least have the same number of balls that outgoing core list is requiring, you're good. So with those concepts in place, let's now transition it a little to the practical configuration. Here are the 4 steps to configuring core lists on your voice gateway. First thing is you have to define the bubbles or the balls. I've been saying like plastic balls, or you might think of them as colored bubbles, whatever again, sticks in your head. So the way that you do that is by going into global configuration mode and typing in dial pure core custom. Now you don't actually then go in and say, oh, it's the pink ball and the blue ball and the yellow ball and all that kind of thing. What you do is you go in and define them by names. These names can be whatever you want. Matter of fact, I guess you could come in and say pink and blue and yellow and that kind of thing, but it wouldn't make sense. Now what these are doing is defining essentially what bubbles you have. So I've got the blue bubble, the purple bubble, the yellow bubble, and all that kind of thing. So it's just saying, here's your Play-Doh to work with. It hasn't assigned anything yet. So you go in and create them all. Now what I did was name them logically, like 911 call, local call, long distance call, international call, right? So then we define our outgoing core lists. These will be applied to the outgoing dial peers. So here's what I've done. So I'm going to say I've got core list and I'm going to name it emergency, right? And I'm going to say the bubble that I'm going to put under there, or the ball that I'm going to put under there, is actually 911 call. Now, it's very difficult, and this is where it lost me when I was learning it. It's very difficult to make that step to say, okay, how does this actually impact an outgoing call? I don't get it. Now, let me jump you down straight to step 4 for a second, just to give you some foresight so you're not just following steps blindly. Eventually, we're going to have dial peer, let's just say 911, which has the destination pattern, 911, that it matches and sends it out port, we'll just say 1/0, right? Now, some FXO port or something like that. Now, what we're going to do is have a command under there that says core list outgoing emergency, right? So what does that do? It says, okay, I'm attaching this core list and an outgoing. Now remember, the outgoing ones is what applies the restriction. It's saying you can't get out this dial peer. You are not allowed to dial 911 unless you have the bubbles that are listed under this emergency. So what bubbles are required? 911 call. You have to have the 911 call. Or if you decided to put blue as your name, then you got to have the blue bubble, essentially. Whatever link you want to make there, you can't get out this dial peer without that, right? Now, take a look at this. So actually, before I do that, so I've defined emergency, local, long distance, international, and initially it looks a little tedious. It's like, okay, I create this with one bubble. I create this with one bubble. I mean, can't I just apply the bubble straight to the dial pair? It seems tedious to just create another thing, this dial pair core list with this name, when I could just apply this to, well, I can't, well, you'll see when we get to this third step. Third, you create or define your incoming core list. In this case, this will be what assigns the permission to your users. Keep that one burned into your mind. Okay, so the users are going to get this to define their access. So I create a core list called LD. We'll call it long distance, right? Which contains the 911 call, the local call, and the LD call bubbles. This will eventually be assigned, let's just keep it simple, to the incoming dial pair. So we would, for, let's say, extension 1111, like I had in the last one, we would have core list incoming LD. And now this phone, when they pick up and dial, will automatically be assigned these three bubbles. That's their three keys, if you will, if we're using that key and lock analogy, to where we've got these different dial pairs. Here's 911 calling, here's long distance calling, here's local calling, each one requiring its own little bubble. You know, each one of these being assigned one of these. As it's going out, he's got these three keys. He's got these three bubbles that it lines up to. So when he dials 911, say, he's going to match this, and it's going to say, whoa, I've got the emergency core list assigned here, which is requiring the 911 call bubble. Do you have it? And he goes, yep, I got it right here. 911 call is part of my incoming core list. Now, again, I haven't assigned any of these because that's step 4. Now, there's one big thing. You might be like, okay, just the order of this seems a little confusing. Why did you assign the outgoing core list or create the outgoing ones before you created the incoming ones? Well, there's a weird rule that you need to be aware of. If a dial pair, or I should say, if a user, if a calling entity, how's that? If a calling entity does not have an incoming core list assigned, they can dial everything. It's backwards, right? So essentially, you've got all these dial pair core lists created that are assigned to all your dial pairs. And this phone, let's say we didn't assign a core list incoming. He picks up 9 and dials 911. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I require the emergency core list. He's like, I don't have anything. Router's like, you're good then. It's totally opposite, right? Totally opposite what you think it would be. It's like, wait a sec. You're saying if he walks up empty-handed, the router's like, yeah, you have full access? That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's, you might go, huh? Why did Cisco do it that way? They did it that way so you could implement your calling restrictions without causing an outage. See, if you did it the other way, if you said an empty core list has no restrictions, then as soon as you start applying these to your dial pairs, you've got outage windows. You've got to have outage windows defined because now nobody can call until you assign the incoming permissions, right? So instead, what Cisco said is, hey, if you don't have any incoming core lists applied, you have full access. That might be a better way to think about it. That wording is essentially the incoming core list restricts you to whatever is defined underneath there. You can only access those bubbles. Right? So if you don't have that, then you have no restrictions. Thus, you can call everything. Okay, now it's all led up to here. What I've done is I've taken all the pieces that we've seen kind of the fragments of implementing core lists, and put it all into one glorious practical example. And I know, if anything has been fuzzy until now, this is going to put it all together. I know it. So let's first off define the scenario. We've got an analog phone here, FXS 1/0/1. Over here on the right, we've got the PSTN connection. Maybe it's going out of T1, FXO. It doesn't really matter per se. So let's define the steps. Well, before we do, let me even go right here. This dial pair over on the left defines the POTS dial pair needed to make that analog phone ring. So we've created destination pattern 5000, set it out port 1/0/1. That's going right here. So we've got that. That's all well known and good. But this is our new command of the day. Core list incoming LD is now applying some type of core list. So before we break that down, let's go back to the steps. Remember, step 1, I color coded it based on the steps. Step 1 was to define the core list. So we go to global config mode and type in Dial Pure Core Custom. This is creating our bubbles, if you will. You can name these whatever you want. These are just identifiers. You could name them 1, 2, 3, 4. You could name them blue, red, green, brown. I mean, whatever. They're just names that you make up. We chose to call them 911 call, local call, LD call, and internet call as our bubble name. So let me just write step 1. Okay, then we go under and put those bubbles into a core list. So I created one called emergency, local, long distance, and internet. Now these are, I can just tell by looking at them, these are the outgoing. Typically, the outgoing core list will have one member. One bubble. Now, could you have two? For example, could I say, well, in order to call 911 here, I want them to have the 911 call, and I want them to have, well, not long distance, maybe local call access. So they have access to the PSTN and they can call 911. Sure, you could do that. But, I mean, you can already see it's kind of tedious to do it. So most of the time, your outgoing core lists are just going to have one underneath. So I've got emergency, local, long distance, and internet, and you can see what members they have. Just, I mean, reference the two right there. Now, step 3 is I create the incoming core list. In this case, there's only one. It's called LD. Could have created more, but just didn't have room on the slide easily. So I'm going to say, this is my incoming core list, which grants access to the 911, local, and LD call bubbles. Okay. Now, I'll expand that a little bit more later, but I want to call your attention to this. I usually wouldn't do it this way, but it's so near to us, we might as well look at it. We apply this in the incoming direction. Now remember, when something is applied to a core list incoming, this is granting permissions. So this phone right here inherits 911 call, local call, and LD call bubbles. He has access to them. Then we apply each one of these in the outgoing direction. I've got local, got emergency, long distance, and international. Oop, right there. So these are all applied in the outgoing direction. Now when this phone goes off hook and starts dialing, immediately he gets all of these permissions right here. He dials an emergency number. It says, okay, do you have access to whatever is in the emergency core list bubble? It goes, okay, emergency is 911 call. He's got 911 call. That's a match. Ding, ding, ding. He can make an emergency call. Did you see how that works? And then he dials 9 and some 10-digit number, right? 10-digit dialing. Goes, oh, this requires the local core list, and it looks at local and says, okay, does it have the local call bubble? It does. Ding, ding, ding. You get the point, right? It's pretty straightforward when you put it all together. What I think gets confusing is almost this double step right here. It's almost like you want to just put the bubble, like 911 call. At least this for me was the pain point when I learned it. I was like, I just want to put 911 call under here. Like, I don't want this second thing. Like, I need this emergency list that just has this bubble. I just want to put the bubble under there. But you can't do it that way. It's not the Cisco way. Now, what I was saying earlier when I was kind of holding back is I could typically create more core lists. Like this grants long distance access, but I could create dial pure core list, local only. And maybe under there have the member 911 call and the member local call. So anybody that's assigned this local only cannot call international, cannot even call long distance because they don't have access to those two bubbles. Tell me that put it all together. That if it didn't, just rewind, because that's the best example of taking all those concepts and putting them all in one place. I just had a total random side thought. As I was transitioning this slide, I was thinking, I bet some of you out there are like, who is this freak? Why is he so excited about core lists and calling restrictions and all that? And it was funny. There was sometimes the people at CBT Nuggets email me when they find like a positive review of one of the series. They never email me the negative reviews. I'm actually grateful for that. But they sent me one where I can't remember what series it was, but whoever reviewed it said, this guy can make paint drawing sound interesting. And I read it and I thought, No, no, I actually can't make paint drying sound interesting because it's not interesting to me. But like when you find something like teaching has to be the coolest job ever. It's my job to take all the stuff that I found really interesting and really cool when I first learned it and show it to somebody. It's just like, I mean, think of the coolest thing that you got. Like for instance, I just got a week ago or so the iPhone 5, and I'm like, okay. I had the iPhone 4, so the iPhone 5 is what? It's just faster, right? But when I go to my friend's house, he's pulling out his cell phone, and I'm kind of like pulling out my cell phone and just kind of playing with it, hoping he notices that I've got it because I want him to be like, oh, you got the 5, and he didn't notice, but I'm like, oh, check this out, because I want him to notice, because I want to be like, dude, this thing is awesome, and I want to show you, and this is great, and so welcome to my life as a teacher. If you want a really cool job, become a teacher, because you could just, I mean, all you do is like, oh man, I like when I figured out coreless on the plane flight back, I was like, this is awesome. I finally get it. It makes sense in my head, and that's so fun. So I've got to give you one more example. That's what made me think of it. Is CBT Nuggets got me a new keyboard. And it's a solar keyboard. It's got solar panels on it, and between this slide and the last slide, there's this little button on here. Check this out. I push this button, and it comes up with like a happy, sad face, like here's how much power you've got on your keyboard. And look at this, like I'm standing in front of it right now. That's why I'm sad. You see how the little sad face is right there, and it's like, oh, you're sad right now because I'm using power, but I step aside. Come on now, that's the light behind me is now hitting my, and then I walk in front of it. Tell me that's not great. Anyway. So what did we see? What did we see in this nugget, and what do I want you to do with it? We saw calling privileges. We saw that it is more than just blocking users. I mean, and I didn't even expand into all the different possibilities, but I mean, 911 calls, you could have, if it fails over between different destinations, some people can fail over to the PSTN, other people can't. I mean, there's all kinds of different uses that you could use for this, but it is primarily to allow certain calling privileges for some people and certain privileges for another. To do that, we saw we had to reconstruct our PSTN dial pair, and then we saw the glorious implementing core lists. Now, what do I want you to do with it? I want you to test it out on, again, your lab equipment. You can apply core lists. I know in all my examples, I had the PSTN connection, but I know not everybody has the ability to have a PSTN connection. You can apply core lists to an FXS port. So, I mean, all you got to do is take a router, get a couple FXS ports, put one phone right here, one phone right here. Maybe this is 1/0/0 and this is 1/0/1. I mean, you can actually point all the PSTN dial peers out to this phone. Like the role of the PSTN will be played by phone A, if you will. And anytime you dial the PSTN, you can have it call out here. Then you can go through and start implementing your core restrictions. And what I would do is break it down even further. So for example, maybe you do like if you have 10-digit dialing, like Arizona has 602, 480, 623 area codes, dot, 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 and it's all 7 digits. After that, maybe break it into all those, and also add in some long distance codes, and break it down further, and then get crazy. I mean, say, okay, well, I want this phone. Let's try it. I want him to be able to dial the 480 area code and long distance, not any of the other ones. How would I do that? Or maybe I want him to call this and this and this, but not this, but I want another phone. If there were another phone, I want him to call that and this. Again, just start brainstorming, because I guarantee you, when you get to the exam or when you get to the real world, they're going to stretch your mind a little bit. It's not going to be always as straightforward as like, okay, I don't want him calling long distance. It might be a little more complex where it's like, well, I don't want him calling long distance, but I want him calling international, but not local, but that phone can call local and long distance. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so you not only have to know the core listing, but how do you efficiently put together your inbound restrictions so that you can do it in the best possible way? See what I'm saying? So sometimes it takes a little thought on that end. All right. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.